So I thought I would do a little behind the scenes video of the Gethsemane one. So if you haven't seen the main video of the Gethsemane story, go and watch that first. So this is just a little overview of the set. So these letter figures, I don't think they make them nowadays, but they are vintage and you can pick them up on eBay for not too much. We've got obviously the trees and so on. We've gone for them. And then a few trees here I've just made out of sort of irregularly shaped green blocks. Built those up, and I've gone from sort of lighter trees down as we get deeper into the darkness of the garden, down to these sort of purpley branches down the back. As regards flowers, I've gone for reds and whites. Red sort of thinking of blood, and white of innocence. So you'll see there I've sort of kept that theme going in those little sort of extra bits of flowers. Our characters then, the little capes are mostly leather, some fabric. They're just cut out of leather and a little hole punched in them for the head. And for this scene, I think it's John's Gospel specifies that they were carrying torches. So you'll see I've got a few varieties of torches. That one there is a sort of Aladdin's lamp with the fire in it. That one is actually a camera that I've turned sideways and put a lamp on. I have a few that I've just made out of sticks and blocks of various kinds. The likes of that one there, that's a sort of a telescope kind of piece with the fire put in it. And these ones here, these came with a nativity set, but they're actually the ice cream cone, if you're familiar with it, with the ice cream off the top of it, and a little piece of fire in it. I've also used some actual lights for the set, so these are battery LED tea lights, which are quite good, but they're a bit bulky around the bottom. And I've used a couple of actual birthday candles, but obviously be very careful that you don't set the place on fire if you're attempting something with real flame. And these burn really quickly, so there's about 4 sets of these used in that few minutes of video that you have hopefully seen. The other thing I've done as regards lighting is this is an LED bulb which comes with a remote, so you can change colour. So again, I've gone for the sort of reds there, both the sort of darkness but also the sort of idea of blood and sacrifice. This is the lantern that was in the scenes outside, so it has a sort of flickering effect. So without it actually being in shot, it gives you a bit of flicker. This is a fire glow bulb for an electric fire. So I've just put that in an angle poised lamp. So again, be careful of fire risk, because that does get quite hot, because it's probably a larger bulb than should normally be in that. And what I've been doing then to get a bit of reflection is using this. So this is an envelope that I got some Lego delivered in actually, which is very shiny. And this is a scarf I have borrowed. So when you knock the main lights off, shining the lamp onto these and giving them a bit of a wiggle, that you get this sort of flickering light effect. In terms of weapons, then the text says with swords and clubs, so the swords are a fairly classic Lego piece from the castle. These are clubs, so they would come with the caveman. And then I've added, one of the Gospels just says weapons, so I've added a few general sticks and such stuff. And I've given this farm this sort of classic torch-wielding man with a pitchfork. So when designing your set, if you're doing a biblical passage, or indeed any sort of narrative, just study the text closely for details, and indeed the commentators and so on as well. Gethsemane, I think, means Olive Garden, so I've included these, I think usually called cherries. I have used them as grapes before for a vineyard passage. And then more generally, as a sort of an overview to the text, I've put in the Garden of Gethsemane little sort of hints of the Garden of Eden. There's one of the church fathers said that Adam was disobedient in the garden and Jesus was obedient in the garden. So I've got this little apple tree here. I've got in this tree, we have a snake here coming down. There's an apple over there on that tree. And then a few other sort of little biblical hints. I've put this little lamb in, sort of the idea of Jesus as sacrifice, as the Lamb of God. And I've put a little chicken in as a little sort of hint of Peter and the rooster crowing. I realise that's not a rooster, that's a chicken, but it's a little sort of subliminal hint there. A few thoughts on the Gethsemane set. I'll also show you, I have been using a tripod, but I have struggled to get the tripod in close enough to the set for filming, and I've come across this. It's called a monopod. It's essentially a selfie stick, but on one end of it, the opposite end from the thing obviously, is a screw which fits a standard tripod screw. I have screwed that onto the tripod, which would let you get extra height, but if we angle that, we get a sort of a camera that we can swing in. So I've used that both for sort of swinging side to side, trying not to demolish too much of the set, and also to do a sort of extended zoom, because we can pull that in and out. The fabric underneath is actually a green screen. I did have a go at green screening, but because so much of my Lego is green, it never really worked, so I've sort of moved to using that, because it is quite close to the Lego board as just sort of a background, rather than having bits of table on view. And just finally, sort of thought of just whatever you can get your hands on in terms of commentaries or texts on things, just to give you, because you're only looking at a relatively short passage, you'll have a fairly short section to read in anything, but it just gives you a few ideas of where you're going, particularly with application, and maybe also a bit of background that can be useful on when you're setting up your set or your scenery. Some of the commentators did suggest Gethsemane might have been sort of a walled garden. So you can see there, I've used a bit of stonework at the back there. I didn't quite have enough to wall it in, and I sort of had it built by the time I read that, but I've given it a wee fence. And I suppose my only other thought is see what is out there in Lego. This is sort of a Roman character. So he came much like that, except for the weapons. So I dare say he'll make an appearance again. If you ever wanted to do pilot or anything, he'd be very good for that. A lot of the helmets and stuff come from a castle set I had as a child. And I do also reuse characters. So these little red characters were scribes at one point. These black characters were chief priests, just from sort of looking at some other videos and footage of what other people had done with real actors. And this was the high priest, which I had used for a previous set. So the ephod there is a life jacket, which I've added to with some nail paints that Mum gave me. The rest of that, fairly self-explanatory. Again, the pomegranates and stuff around the bottom there, added on. And finally a note on the ear scene. So this is an elf hat. So the ears are attached to that. Obviously your standard Lego character doesn't have ears, so it's difficult to cut them off. I had toyed with just using a very small piece of yellow, possibly with some red for blood. I didn't use any blood in the end. I thought that might be a bit too much for kids. So I have got a couple of these elf hats, and I don't like modifying Lego, but I have in this instance taken one of the ears off. And that is the ear, which if you look very closely is lying at the bottom in the set. And so essentially I've had two of those and swapped them around. Thus meaning that I can cut the ear off and then heal him. The birthday cake candles, incidentally, I've set into these, which are bits of a palm tree. And the little pointy thing that goes into the cake goes into that quite nicely. I have discovered since that the candles do actually fit into a Lego man's hand, but I'd be a wee bit nervous about that, because Lego men do have a tendency to tip over. And if you didn't get it out in time, you could end up melting your Lego man. These little speech mark things, that's from a different video. They are quite good. So you get a set which comes with a fair amount of the little speech bubbles. There's a standard speaking, there's a sort of a thought bubbly one, and there's a sort of jagged edge exclamation type one. You get a small page of stickers with them, so a few stock phrases, and then some blank ones that you can write yourself. But you also get this, quite snazzy template, so you can print them out on the computer and then trim them to fit that. So ideally, if you have printer paper that is sort of full A4 page sticky label, but obviously you could just use a bit of blue tack or something. The main limit with them, I find, is how much text you can fit on. So you'll see in that Gethsemane video, I've done it nearly all in post-production. I'll just put the text on using Adobe Premiere Elements, which I got with Adobe Photoshop Elements for not very much. So I think there is a more deluxe version of that, but the Elements has quite a bit in it. And one final thing that I sort of like with the Lego sets is that if you want to get a particularly close angle, you can demolish part of your set nearly. So say I want to get in on that character there, I can strip out a few trees and fences, obviously trying to be careful to put them back. And I can then get in really close. One thing I've struggled with is getting my phone to focus as close as this, and particularly in a night shot, that can be tricky. So essentially I've just shot quite a bit of footage and then picked the best of a bit of it. So that concludes my little behind the scenes thoughts. Hopefully some of that has been of interest to you. Bye.